Good morning. My name is Toby Babcock. This is my interview reflection video assignment. For my assignment, I chose to interview someone named Brian Abdillah. He's a close friend of mine who I've known for a few years. I went to college with him. His degree, he got a Master's of Science in Counseling, and he graduated from Cairn University. Right now, for his job, he is a licensed associate counselor at the Center for Christian Counseling and Relationship Development. A lot of duties that Brian is expected to do at his job is his main responsibility is to provide counseling, whether that's individual or marriage or group counseling, to people that come to his practice. Brian meets with clients for about 45-minute sessions to address concerns about mental or physical, emotional, spiritual capacities. Additionally, Brian counsels at a private Christian school. Counseling at the school is more short-term than his other job, and it is solution-focused, and Brian usually has one or a few sessions with the students, as opposed to an indeterminate amount of sessions that he will have with his other clients. Brian is expected to, in some capacity, further the interests of the counseling center that he works for. He sets up meetings with his clinical director to further relationships in the community. Brian fosters relationships with coworkers by getting together or by having casual conversations. These are all things that are expected at his job. Brian finds his job very fulfilling and rewarding, but also challenging. Brian says that it's a real privilege and honor to be able to participate in the process of people's growth, and he feels that it is ultimately God's process. He says that he is a facilitator in the process, and the least important part of the process. Brian says the most important part of the therapy process between him and his client and God is God, and the second most important part is the client, that he is the least important part. Brian says that a lot of jobs that people have are just a means to an end, where you work and make money, and then you go home, and then you go back to your job the next day. Brian doesn't see any problems with this, but he says it's special to be able to be in a job that has an eternal impact, because people are growing in their faith in the Lord, or growing as people, or healing, or learning new coping skills, or communication skills that ultimately will improve their lives and allow them to have more capacity for positive impact and change in their lives. Having the opportunity to be trusted with the difficult and sometimes painful things that people have dealt with, or are dealing with, or experienced, or have done is especially rewarding for Brian. People are usually in a vulnerable position when they are with him, and getting to witness that and hopefully be a positive and compassionate presence to them is very powerful. Brian gets a lot out of it when he is able to help someone and they make progress and get where they are trying to go, and he says that it's very fulfilling for him. Brian also talked a lot about the struggles of his job. Brian says that he went to school for 2 years, just learning and not counseling. And during his third year, he was an intern at the Cairn Counseling Center when he started to deal with actual clients, although he was still in school at the time. Since school has ended, it's been a little over a year, and he's been practicing the whole time. In total, he's been involved over 4 years in the counseling program, and over 2 years he's been seeing clients. One of the common things he's come to understand is that it takes a lot of experience to become good at the job, which means you have to learn how to be not fully competent at it while doing it for a long time. Brian says this is not an uncommon struggle among counselors. He has to live in the space of doing a job that has an eternal impact and significance, while at times not understanding well or not being effective, or feeling like he's out of his depth. He says that this is humbling and stressful. Brian says at times he has an unhealthy outlook on the job because this focus is a self-centered focus, when his focus in counseling should be on the other person. And he says it's something that he has to grow in. He thinks it would be more effective if his focus were more on the client and less on his own performance at times when it becomes detrimental to his work. He has to live in a space of not being great at the job and that he has to keep learning, and he says it's humbling. He says that a lot of time at work people will talk about vicarious trauma, which means taking on trauma from clients. But for Brian, it's more stressful to feel like he's failing his clients than to be hearing their trauma. Brian also says there are logistical challenges. to hearing real-world things that you don't get trained for, but figure out as you go. He says you have to learn through experience rather than learning in a book. An example that Brian gave me is that recently a client who had been seeing him for 6 months showed up at the wrong office and wasn't able to make it to their appointment. Brian had to decide if he was ethically obligated to still charge them for the appointment. His late fee says that he is, but he had to decide if he was still going to charge them. This is an example of something that shows up in the job that he doesn't get taught in school. Brian did end up charging them for that session. Brian says that private practice is akin to being a small business owner, so it means no time off or benefits, which comes with financial troubles. It can be hard to build the practice and have a sustainable caseload, which is more difficult and complicated than working a job when you come in and clock out at the end of the day and work for a corporation. Brian also continues his education as part of his job. Brian says part of the requirement of keeping his license, he has to continue his education through online courses or other avenues like books. There's literature about psychology that changes regularly, and it takes more than just getting your degree to be an expert. Brian isn't done training after he graduated, but will continue to learn as a requirement for his job. He also does his own reading on the side. He'll read books. He has supervisions and staff meetings where they discuss areas of growth at his job. He has a weekly meeting with his boss and other people that work at the practice for the sake of professional and clinical development. He initiates conversations with colleagues if he's having a hard time with a certain case. If he knows people who are going through counseling programs, he talks with them about what they are learning, and he tries to be supportive to them, and he also tries to learn from them. Brian's job requires continuing education, whether it's through books or online courses or conversations with other professionals. I asked Brian if he had any advice for anyone entering the field. Brian said it depends on if the person has a niche or target, and that if they did, it would influence his advice. Brian's main recommendation is to get comfortable with how long the process will take. He says it's not just a degree, but pursuing a discipline. A lifelong pursuit of a field rather than just getting a degree and being done. If your attitude or thought process is more about wanting to do your job and go home and not have to worry about your job while you're at home, it's probably not a good fit for you. This job requires more than just clocking in and clocking out and being done. You need to be passionate about people because you'll encounter that your perspective is one of many ways people can think. If that's not an interest of yours, it will become tough to stay invested. If someone is picking counseling programs, some considerations are cake prep programs. Brian's program doesn't have cake prep accreditation, but more places are moving toward it, and as time goes on, it will probably become more required long term. Benefits of cake prep curriculums are standardized to a degree, and people hiring you will know what you went over and are familiar with. However, it's not required, and Brian's classes met cake prep standards anyway. If you are coming from a Christian background, one should consider having a Christian counseling background. If you are thinking about going into counseling and are trying to decide if you want to do a Christian or regular program, Brian suggests a book called Psychology and Christianity, 5 Views. This book breaks down the relationship between psychology and Christianity and how involved one is with the other, and can help you define and choose your approach. Talking with Brian helped me in a number of ways. For one thing, it was great to see how fulfilling a job in psychology can be. It's clear that Brian really enjoys his job, even though he finds it challenging, and that was encouraging to hear. I liked hearing how much thought he had put into all the questions before he even heard them. It's clear that this is something that he thinks about a lot. I also enjoyed hearing about what Brian's job looked like, and I learned a lot of things that I couldn't learn out of a book, such as the problems that he experiences or the stressors that come with the job, or even the ways that he has to continue his education. It was nice to hear how involved the process is, how it's not just something that you do and then you go home and just continue your day, that you have to involve yourself in this job lots of hours, even when you're not at the office. So it was good to hear some realistic things about the workload and what expectations in the job should be. Thank you very much.